Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. Not going to be able to say that for too much longer. This is the second to last share in Mishnah Berurah, in God's Mishnah Berurah, Mirz Hashem. So we're going to be learning today, Mirz Hashem, Daf Kuf Samach Gimel Amud Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Megillah. We pick up on the top line of Kuf Samach Gimel Amud Aleph. It's Siman Taf Reish Tzadik Vav Sif Vav. Says the Mechaber, Yesh mi sha'omer. There are those that say, and this is brought from a Torah in the name of the Ram Meirutenberg, Yesh mi sha'omer. There are those that say, Sheha'avel chayiv l'shloyach manos, that an avel is chayiv to send shalach manos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, is cut Yud Zayin, Sheha'avel afilu toich shiva. Even an avel toich shiva. There are those that say that he has to send shalach manos to hachayiv b'chol mitzvahs ha'amurais b'Torah, because an aval is chayiv in kol mitzvahs ha'amurais b'Torah. So why should the mitzvah of shalach manos be any different? V'chol shekain the chayiv ma'atanas le'evyonim, and the Mishnah Berurah says if he's going to be chayiv in mishloach manos, then al achas kama v'kama, it's a kal v'chomer, he is definitely going to be chayiv in matanas le'evyonim. Now, why is that a kal v'chomer? So we're going to see that one of the problems the poskim have with an avel either giving or receiving mishloach manos is we know that an avel toich shana, somebody who loses a parent, Rahman al-Islam, an avel toich shiva, one of the isurim that he has is she'elas shalom. He's not allowed to greet anybody, and nobody is supposed to greet him. Now, the concept of mishloach manos may involve an inyan of she'elas shalom. What are you doing when you give shalach manos? You go to somebody, what are you going to do? Knock on the door, the avel is going to come, you're not going to say hello, you're not going to do anything, you're going to put a package in his hand. Even the giving of the Mishloach Manos itself, let's remember what the Manos Levi said. We had the Machlokes, the Trumas Hadeshen, I don't know if it's a Machlokes, but the two opinions of the basis for the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. Well, the basis is a pasuk. I guess the root cause, the root focus of the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos, the Manos Levi said it's to be Marbe Shalom Vereus. And therefore the poskim say that receiving shalach manos might be a problem of she'el shalom. Matanas lavyonim is not an issue of she'el shalom. Matanas lavyonim is tzedakah. Also, the mishloach manos involves simcha. That's an inyan of simcha, even according to the Trumas Hadeshen, where we give mishloach manos to make sure everybody should have what they need for the Sudas Purim. In that case, the mishloach manos is kind of part and parcel of Sudas Purim. Sudas Purim is definitely an inyan of simcha. So mishloach manos might be inappropriate during Avelus because it's an inyan of simcha. Matanas lavyonim is tzedakah. It's not really an inyan of simcha. So the Chavetz Chaim says, if we're going to say that the avel is chayiv in mishloach manos, then certainly he's going to be chayiv in matanas lavyonim. Dirshu footnote number 33 makes an interesting point. There's a very well-known minig that people don't take anything from a base avel, toich shiva. From a shiva house, you don't take anything out from a shiva house. So in that case, how is the avel going to give shalach manos? The shalach manos is something that's coming from the shiva house. So it says here in footnote 33, even though there is this well-known minig not to take anything from a shiva home, Kasav Gesher Achayim, the Gesher writes, Shemishloach Manos mutar likach mibeisa avel. Mishloach manos is not a problem in this regard. Kevan shehu dvar mitzvah. This inyan doesn't apply to a dvar mitzvah. And he gives another reason. Shapurim doimel l'Shabbos, because we're functioning, we have been going according to the opinion of the Ramah. Let's remember that the Ramah argues on the Mechaber and holds that Avelus is not noyig on Purim, certainly not Avelus b'farhesia, and in that way, Purim is treated very similar to Shabbos in the context of Hilchos Avelus, and he says over here, "Ubeshabbos nireh shaloi makpidim al kach." It seems that there was never a hakpada on taking something from a shiva home on Shabbos. Footnote number 34, they bring down over here from the Ben Ish Chai, She'ein la'avel l'shlayach ela la'adam echad belvad, that while it's true that the avel is chayiv to send shalach manos, he should only send to one person. V'loy laharbe b'nei adam, not to many people. V'chein b'vor b'shalos u'tshuvas megidais, v'chein das hagoyin Rabbi Yosef Shalom al Yashav zatzal, she'roi sha'avel yishalach manos rak la'adam echad v'lo yoser, that the avel should only send shalach manos to one person and not more. Okay, so we had over here the Mechaber said Yesh bi sha'omer sha'avel chayiv l'shlayach manos, and we saw Mishnah Berurah is cut in Yud Zayin. Let's take a look at Mishnah Berurah is cut in Yud Ches. Chayiv l'shlayach manos, he has to send shalach manos. Achein, nevertheless, says the Chavetz Chaim, while he is going to send shalach manos, kol dvar simcha loy yishlach. It sounds like he should send a basic shalach manos. He shouldn't send a shalach manos of dvar simcha. So not one of these tremendous shalach manos, or maybe not such a thematic shalach manos that's going to be mar b'simcha. He should just send 2 types of food to one person to be yotze the basic mitzvah of shalach manos. V'zel lashon sefer chasidim, and now the Chavetz Chaim brings down from the sefer chasidim, mi shemes aviv b'purim. If somebody, Nebuch Loyaledu, had a loss on Purim, his father or mother passed away on Purim, L'shana haba, the coming year, Yeshalach manos, he should send Mishlach manos after hu yartzeit, even though that's going to be the yartzeit. Many of the halachos that apply on to an avel during the shana of Avelus continue to apply on the day of the yartzeit. Even though the day of the yartzeit is really the day after the year is over, but many of the halachos that apply during the Shana Rishona apply to the day of the yartzeit as well. But he says over here, L'shana haba yishalach manos, he should send shalach manos after yartzeit. U'ba'osei shana, on that year when his father passed away, so on the day that his father passed away, yishalach mois oy basar la'aniyim, he should give matanos le'evyonim in the form of money or food, rak loy tafnukim ha'asuyim l'simcha, but he should not send any kind of delicacies that would be mar b'simcha, and it sounds like b'shlach manos he certainly does not send. Okay, now let's go to the Ramah, top line here. Kuf Sadoch Gimel Amud Aleph says the Ramah. So the Mechaber said that there are those that say that an avel should send shalach manos, and indeed it seems that that is how we paskin. We are noyeg that an avel toich shana does send basic b'shalach manos to 1 or 2 people. Hagab, but the Ramah says aval ein sholchin la avel, but we do not send shalach manos to an avel kol shneim asar chodesh, for the entire 12 months of Avelus, U'Kamoshe Yisborach b'Yeridea Siman Shin Pei Hey Ayin Sham, like the halacha is explained in Yeridea in Hilchos Avelus Siman Shin Pei Hey, and we'll have to see in the Mishnah Berurah what the Ramah is referring to when he sends us to Siman Shin Pei Hey. V'im ein ba'ir ela ha'avel im acher. What do you do if the only 2 Jewish residents of the city are an avel and another person? So this other person, the only way he could be Mekayim Shalach Manos is by sending to the Avel. So says the Ramah, Chayiv l'shlayach la'avel k'dei l'kayim mishlach manos. In that case, you have to send Shalach Manos to the Avel in order to be Mekayim the mitzvah of mishlach manos. Ela im kein machala avel al manasai, unless the Avel is going to be Michael and he's going to say, I don't want to receive it. Now remember, we had the Ramah earlier that mentioned that you could be Yotze mishlach manos if the person does not receive it. We had that on Kuf Samach Beis Amud Aleph Siman Taf Reish Tzadikei Sif Dalid. V'im shalech manos l'reyehu v'hu eina roitza l'kablam oy moichaloi yatsa. So it seems that the Ramah is saying the same halacha here. What he's saying is, if it's only you and an avel, so send mishlach manos to the avel in order to be yotze the mitzvah. If he doesn't want to accept it because he feels it's inappropriate for him to accept it, toich avelus, so he won't accept it, but you'll be yotze the mitzvah anyway because you sent it. Okay, let's see in the Mishnah Berurah, ice cutting your test. So the Mishnah Berurah says, Aval ein shalchid la'avel, we do not send mishlach manas to an avel. Says the Chavetz Chaim, this is true afilu davar she'eno shel simcha. Even if you're sending a very basic mishlach manas, you still do not send mishlach manas to an avel. V'ema avel hu ani, if the avel is a poor person, mutar l'shlach le'mais afilu tag shiva, you could send him matanas le'evyonim, you could send him money, even during shiva d'loigara mitztaka, because that's no less than sending him tztaka, which is certainly mutar. You don't send mishlach manas to the avel for the full 12 months of avelus. Hainu la'aviv v'imai. When we speak about 12-month mourning period, we're referring to somebody who's an avelus for a parent. V'l'sha'ar kroivim tag shloshim. The same halacha would apply to somebody who lost a different relative, like a brother or a sister. So then the mourning period for him would be shloshim. So we would not send him mishlach manas during shloshim. Va'atam. What is the reason why we do not send mishlach manas to an avel? So the Chavetz Chaim brings down here from the Gra and other achronim, va'atam kedin she'elas shalom, sha'aser shneim aser chodesh. So like I mentioned earlier, the problem of mishlach manas, according to the Paiskim, seems to be it's an issue of she'elas shalom. There's an interesting footnote here in the Dirshu, Dirshu footnote number 37. Let's say you did send a mishlach manas to an avel. The Ksav Sofer writes, Shemuter la'avel lekabloi. The avel is allowed to take delivery of the mishlach manas. You maybe should not have sent it to him, but if you did send to him, he is allowed to accept it. Kevan sha'ashaleach shal b'shloimai shal avel bekach sheshalach loi. The over here, the one who did something inappropriate was the mishaleach. The mishaleach went against the concept of not doing she'ela shalom with an avel. The mishaleach sent it, and by doing that, he did she'ela shalom. Ve'ein b'kabalosai shel avel taisefes shel she'ela shalom. The avel is not doing anything by accepting it. The avel is not greeting the mishaleach. The mishaleach did she'ela shalom by sending it to the avel. The avel is not being moisif onto that avla by accepting it. V'chei kasa b'shal's Jewish shevet halevi revosner zatzal she'muter she'arei mavur she'misha shal b'shalom ha'avel. Let's say there's an avel in the street and somebody goes over to him and says shalom aleichem. Muter la'avel la'avesloi. The halacha is that the avel is allowed to respond. He's allowed to say aleichem shalom. So there's the same way the avel is allowed to respond to somebody who actually did she'ela shalom, he's allowed to accept the mishlach manas that potentially has an issue of she'ela shalom. So v'imkeinu adin shemuter la'avel lekabelos mishlach manas. Now if you skip the next paragraph, the last paragraph of this footnote is also an interesting concept. V'lishloach manos l'rov shehu avel. Let's say somebody davens in a shul and the Rav is in Avelus. Are you allowed to send mishlach manas to the Rav? Kasa b'shal setshuvas divrei malkiel shamuter. Why? Kevin she'ein zeh ela kishilum chayv ve'enoi davar shel simcha. He says sending shalach manas to the Rav is not an issue of she'ela shalom. It's not an issue of simcha. It's like piron chayv. It's like fulfilling an obligation. You have an obligation to the Rav. The Rav services you all year, and he services you in Ruchnius all year. Comes Purim, you got to send b'shalach manas. That's like an obligation that you have. It's like a priyas chayv. On the other hand, das agrach going Reb Chaim Kanievsky she'ein lahater l'shlach manas l'rabbi avel amnam efshel l'shlach lekesef k'makubel. Reb Chaim Kanievsky suggests don't send him mishlach manas. Send him an envelope. Send him a par dollar instead of sending him mishlach manas. I don't have it in front of me. I had wanted to bring it. I do this too often. I forget to bring upstairs to my recording studio over here something that I wanted to say over in the shir. I think it's the Nadvarna Rebbe. No, it's the Amshinova. I'm pretty sure it's the Amshinova. Oh, okay, it's either the Amshinova or the Nadvarna, who lives ba'anius dachkus. He mamish lives like an ani, and he will not take anything from the Chassidim. So he's not one of these Rebbes, with the fur collars and the silver and etc. etc. He lives mamish ba'anius, and he refuses to take any gifts from the Chassidim. But the one time that he will take gifts is on Purim. On Purim, people want to give him shlach manos. He's not going to refuse mishlach manos on Purim. So the Chassidim know that, and therefore what they do is they bring him foodstuffs that he could use all year round. So somebody will bring him 20 cases of wine. So he should have wine for Kiddush all year. Somebody else will bring him 5 cases of tuna fish. So he has tuna fish for his family all year. Another person will bring him 10 cases of jars of gefilte fish. And they'll load up his house with foodstuffs that he could use year round because they know he will not refuse mishlach manos. Okay, now we go to Mishnah Berurah is Katan Chaf Aleph. The Ramah, in the context of this halacha of not sending mishlach manos to the oval, the Ramah sent us to Yeridea Siman Shin Pei Hei. U'kemoishe Yispar b'Yeridea Siman Shin Pei Hei. What exactly does the Ramah want from Siman Shin Pei Hei in Yeridea? Kavanasai, the kavana of the Ramah is, explains the Chavetz Chaim, lahoros, to teach, de b'mokim shenagu lahakel lishal b'shloimah. In Siman Shin Pei Hei, we find that there are those that were mekel in she'ela shalom to an oval on Shabbos. It's a little bit ikar chasar min ha-sefer over here. The Chavetz Chaim does not mention over here that Shin Pei Hei is addressing the question of she'ela shalom on Shabbos. But that's what's being discussed over there in Shin Pei Hei. So, if you live in a locale where the minig is that on Shabbos you do greet an oval, in that case, mutar l'shloach lehem manos gamkein b'snoich shneim asar chodesh. If you live in a locale where the minig is that you're not makbid on she'ela shalom of an oval on Shabbos, well then, according to the Ramah, we treat Purim very much like Shabbos in the context of Hilchos Avelus, because the Ramah paskined that Avelus is not noig on Purim. Certainly not Avelus befarhesia, right? We said Dvarm shebetzina noig, but befarhesia, the oval on Purim does not sit on the floor. He wears regular shoes, right? So in that case, according to the Ramah, we're treating Purim like Shabbos. Well, if you live in a locale where you do she'ela shalom to an oval on Shabbos, then she'ela shalom on Purim is also not a problem. If she'ela shalom on Purim is not a problem, then mishlach manos isn't the problem. And then you can send him mishlach manos on Purim. Now, it's interesting. In years gone by, certainly, the primary address for Hilchos Avelus, Halacha Lamaisa, was the Gesher Achayim. Everybody had a Gesher in the house, and Nabach Le'aleinu came time for Avelus. People went straight to the Gesher for Halacha Lamaisa on Hilchos Purim. Now, if you look at the Gesher, when it comes to the Shaila of sending an oval Mishlach Manos, the Gesher kind of writes, it depends on the Malkum. Depends on the Minig HaMalkum. In some places they give Shalach Manos to an oval. In some places they don't. And interestingly enough, if you look at the Gesher, where he speaks about Mayadim, that's what the Gesher says when he speaks about Purim. He says Shalach Manos to an oval, depends on the Minig HaMalkum. But he sends you back in the Gesher to where he discusses the question of she'ela shalom to an oval. And he says that she'ela shalom on Shabbos is a question. There are those that say that you do, there are those that say that you don't. Now, Lamaisa, when it comes to Sheila Shalom, we seem to be very makel in general when it comes to Sheila Shalom. And the Gesher Taka brings that down, that many are very, very makel when it comes to Sheila Shalom to an Aval Toich Shana, even not on Shabbos, even during the week. There are many who are makel. Certainly if you don't use the word Shalom, if you just say good morning, there are many that are makel. Now I know that nowadays the art scroll morning in a halacha has kind of displaced the Gesher. Right away when somebody is being Isaac and Avelis, instead of running to the Svarim store to buy a Gesher, they're running to Art Scroll to buy Morning in Halacha. And in the Morning in Halacha, in the Art Scroll, they do bring down that there are some that are makel with Sheila Shalom. Shalach Manas, they seem to say very clearly not to give Shalach Manas. And I think that does seem to be the widespread minig, not to send Shalach Manas. I'm a little puzzled why that's the case. Seeing that we seem to be so makel when it comes to She'ela Shalom Toich Shana, why are we then machmer when it comes to Shalach Manas, which is a mitzvah? So I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to say that if it's the Geya, ask your LOR for a psak, but it's a bit confusing to me. Okay. Ois Kadachaf Beis in the Mishnah Berurah. So the Ramah discussed what if you do if the only two people in the city are one Yid and another Yid who's an Aval. So he said you have to give Shalach Manas to the Aval in order to be Mekayim the Mitzvah Shalach Manas, Ella im kain machal ha'aval. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Chaf Beis, the ein nice to lot about Tanal Karchai. The Ramah says, what are you going to do? You're going to force the Aval to accept the Mishlach Manas if he doesn't want to accept it because he feels it's inappropriate? You can't force a gift on somebody. Okay, now we go to Siv Zayin. Now, when it comes to Siv Zayin, I'm going to be Mekayim, a Mishnah in Avos. Shiva Dvarim B'chacham. One of the Shiva Dvarim B'chacham are Alma Shaloi Shama Amar Loi Shameya. If he didn't hear something, he says, I didn't hear it. Which we also take to mean, if somebody doesn't know something, or he doesn't understand something, he should feel free to admit that he doesn't understand it. I'm going to go into Siv Zayin with the preface that there is something going on here in Siv Zayin that I'm befuddled over. I don't have a clear understanding of it, and I'll show you what's troubling me here in Siv Zayin. I will try to clarify it in the future if I can, but right now I am somewhat befuddled by what seems to be the base halacha of Siv Zayin has me a little bit confused. So, with that cryptic preface, let's take a look at Siv Zayin. Says the Mechaber, Yesh mi sha'omer. There is one who says, and this is brought down from the Archas Chaim, and the Mechaber is going to quote the Archas Chaim just about verbatim. Yesh mi sha'omer. There is an Archas Chaim that says, she'oinein mutter bebasar v'yayin, that an oinein is allowed to partake of basar v'yayin, because the mitzvah asay of avelus, which is a mitzvah asay de yachid, right now, only this yachid has a chiyuv of avelus. He happens to be in avelus, so he has an asay de yachid, a mitzvah asay de yachid of avelus. There's a lot of talk about whether avelus is daraisa, avelus is darabanan. Maybe some of Avelus is Daraisa, Aninus maybe is Daraisa, the first day is maybe Daraisa, the rest is Darabanan. But let's accept that there's a Daraisa aspect of Avelus, but it's only an Asay de Yachid. It's an individual Asay on this individual person. And therefore, the Loyasi Asay de Yachid de Avelus, the Dachi Asay de Rabim de Araisa, the Asay de Yachid of Avelus, is not going to be Doiche, and asay de rabim, a communal mitzvah asay, the araisa, calls it a daraisa, de l'smayach bepurim divrei kabbalah ninu. Why are we calling Sudas Purim a daraisa, because even though it's not strictly speaking a daraisa, it's divrei Kabbalah. It's in Megillas Esther. It's in Ksuvim. That's divrei Kabbalah. That's not just some takanas Chazal that we find b'Talmuda in Shas. This is in Ksuvim. It's in Megillas Esther. So the L'sbarach b'Purim divrei Kabbalah ninu shehem kedivrei Torah. Okay, so what did the Mechaber just tell me? Well, midivrei Kabbalah, takanas Mordechai, Ansheknes Sagdola, recorded in Ksuvim, in Megillas Esther, we have Yemei Mishteh V'Simcha. Purim is Yemei Mishteh V'Simcha, and we're mechuyev to have a Simcha Dika Sudas Purim. That means we have to have Basa V'Yayin by Sudas Purim. Now, an Einain, Daf Chav Gimel, Amid Beis, I'm thinking, in Mayid Cotton, an Oval is, an Einain is Aser B'Basa V'Yayin. Who's an Einain? So the Mishnah Berurah says an Einain is Eis Cotton Chav Gimel, Einain Nikra Kolzman Shalei Nikbar Ames. Somebody lost a loved one of the Kroivim that he's mechuyev to sit Shiva for, one of the Shiva Kroivim. The day of the Ptira, before the mace is Nikbar, before the Kfura takes place, that person is an Einain. An Einain is Aser at Basa V'Yayin. An Oval Tait Shiva is allowed to have Basa V'Yayin, but an Einain is Aser in Basa V'Yayin. Now, the Isser of an Einain in Basa V'Yayin is not a din of Avelus. He's not Aser in Basa V'Yayin out of mourning. Let's say you're thinking Tisha B'Av, right? The 9 days. We're Aser in Basa V'Yayin because of mourning. That's not why an Einain is Aser in Basa V'Yayin. An Einain is Aser in Basa V'Yayin, so Beferish Taisvis and Mayid Cotton. He's Aser in Basa V'Yayin because we're afraid if he's going to sit down to a Suda of delicacies of Basa V'Yayin, he might be Nimshach Achar Sudasai, he might get involved in the Suda, and because of that, he may delay the Kfuras HaMeis. And we don't want to delay Kfuras HaMeis, Kavod HaMeis. And since the Tzarchei HaMeis are mutal on the Einain is the one who has the responsibility for the Tzarchei HaMeis, we don't want him getting involved in a Suda with Basa V'Yayin. That would be inappropriate. It could delay the burial. So, we have now a conflict. This person is an Einain, and he's also in Basa V'Yayin. On the other hand, it's Purim, and he has a Chiyuv Purim Suda, Sudas Purim. And Sudas Purim requires Basa V'Yayin. Says the Mechaber from the Archas Chaim, we relax the restriction of Basa V'Yayin, and we allow the Einain to have a Suda with Basar V'Yayin, even though he's an Einain. And the Mechaber says, why? Because when we look at this conflict, what we have is the restriction of the Einain to have Basa V'Yayin is based on an Asay D'Yochid of Avelus. He has a personal mitzvah Asay of Avelus, and the Chiyuv of Sudas Purim is an Asay D'Rabim. Now, even though it's a little bit of a stretch, how are we calling this an Asay D'Raisa? Sudas Purim, it's a D'Rabbanan, says the Mechaber no, and he quotes it from the Archas Chaim. So Rishonim, he says, no, it's Divrei Kabbalah. And since it's Divrei Kabbalah, we're going to give it the strength of a D'Raisa. So if we're going to give it the strength of a D'Raisa, so on the one hand we have Avelus, which is an Asay D'Yochid. On the other hand we have Sudas Purim, which is an Asay D'Rabim. Which one wins? The Asay D'Rabim wins. So the Asay D'Rabim wins, and the Einain is allowed to have Basar V'Yayin. Now, the first thing that just gives me pause, that I'm just a little bit, I don't understand fully, is an Einain. An Einain is pater in Kol HaMitzvah Shabbat Torah. So an Einain is pater from the Chiyuv Asay of Kriya Shema. An Einain is pater from Tefillin. An Einain eats and he doesn't make a bracha Rishon. An Einain doesn't daven. So an Einain is pater from all mitzvahs. Now, the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, is that an Asay D'Yochid or is it an Asay D'Rabim? What exactly does it mean that Megillah is an Asay D'Rabim? It obviously it doesn't just mean that it's an Asay that applies to the entire Rabbim, because Tefillin also applies to the entire rabbim. Kriya Shema also applies to the entire rabbim. And nowhere do we say that an Oval should say Kriya Shema because like Osi Asay the Yachid of Avelus, the Dachi Asay the Rabbim of Kriya Shema or of Tefillin. So what does it mean Asay the Rabbim? The only thing I could think is that Asay the Rabbim over here means that the mitzvah of Sudas Purim is not just that you have an individual chiyuv of Sudas Purim, the same way you have an individual mitzvah of Tefillin or saying Kriya Shema. Your mitzvah of Kriya Shema, your mitzvah of Tefillin is not a communal mitzvah. You could go into your vinkel and you say Kriya Shema when you want to say Kriya Shema. You could go into your vinkel and you could put on Tefillin and you could be yotzei the mitzvah of Tefillin. That mitzvah is upon you and it has nothing to do with your friends. They also have such a mitzvah. But it's a mitzvah that's upon all of the Yechidim. It's not a communal mitzvah. Masha'ekein, Sudas Purim, what Mordechai and Achik Knesset Agdolos said about Purim is that they have to be Yemei Mishta v'Simcha. There's an environment of Simcha. It's a Simcha that is on God's Klal Yisrael. It's not you go into your vinkel and have a Suda. You go into your vinkel and have a Suda. No, it's go out in the street and see everybody running around giving Shalach Manos and Matanas Lav Yonim and wearing costumes, and this one's going to that one's house for the Suda, and that one's going to that one's house for the Suda. We saw that you're supposed to invite guests for the Suda. So it seems that Asay de Rabbim over here means that it's communal. And therefore, the Asay de Yachid of Avelus and the restriction of an Oinen to have Basav Yayin cannot go up against the communal chiyuv of Simcha by Sudas Purim. Now, this is not yet the problem that I have with Siv Zayin. Even though I said that this is a little puzzling to me, I have a pshat in it. This is not what's bothering me yet in Siv Zayin. So far, what we have over here is that he's mutter. The Oval has certain restrictions. The Oinen has certain restrictions. He's potter b'kol mitzvah Shabbat Torah. You would think that if he's potter b'kol mitzvah Shabbat Torah, and there's a unique restriction on an Oinen that he's not allowed to have Basav Yayin, so he shouldn't come to delay for a Sameis, so you would think you're not going to let him sit down and eat a Sudas Purim with Basav Yayin. Kamash Malon, the Mechaber, yes! Sit down and eat a Suda with Basav Yayin because Loi Asi Asay the Yachid of Avelus, V'dachi Asay the Rabbim of Simchas Purim. That's what the Mechaber told us so far. Now comes the Ramah, Hagah. The Cholshkein, certainly, Shechayiv b'mikra begillah u'tfila u'Kriya Shema. Oh, wait a second. Says the Ramah, you're telling me that you're going to relax the restriction of the Isser of an Oinen having Basav Yayin because you're going to allow him to have a Sudas Purim with Basav Yayin. If you're going to relax that restriction, then says the Ramah, certainly he's chayiv in Mikra Megillah, Tefillah, and Kriya Shema. I mean, we're going to say that he can have Basav Yayin and he can have a Purim Suda. And by the way, the Mefarshim say if he's going to eat Basav Yayin while he's in Oinen for a Purim Suda, he's going to make a bracha Rishayna. Don't tell me that he's mechuyev to eat Basav Yayin to have a Purim Suda, but he shouldn't make a bracha on the food or on the Yayin because he's an Oinen. No. If you're telling me that halachically he's required to eat it, then he's required to make a bracha. So the Ramah says, what is this picture over here? The Oinen is not going to say Kriya Shema. He's not going to put on tefillin. He's not going to be mispal, but he's going to have a Purim Suda with Basav Yayin? So says the Ramah, Kolshkein, Shechai b'mikra begillah, u'tfila, u'Kriya Shema. Okay? So let's take a look here before we get even to the most confusing part of this. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah, Eis Kan Chav Talit. Mutter b'Basav Yayin. So first, the Mishnah Berurah points out that you might be a little bit puzzled over here. because we already covered the shita of the Mechaber that Avelus is noyeg on Purim. The Ramah said Avelus is not noyeg on Purim, but the Mechaber holds that Avelus is noyeg on Purim. So Avelus is noyeg on Purim, but Aninus is not. Says the Mishnah Berurah, after das Mechaber le'el da Avelus noyeg b'Purim, mikamokam Aninus svir le'de eina noyeg. But Aninus is not noyeg u'kamoisha kasav atam. Basically, what the Chavetz Chaim is saying like this, you have to realize, the Mechaber said that Avelus is noyeg on Purim, but Avelus does not come into conflict with Purim. What are the restrictions of Avelus going to stop the Oval from doing? We said that he could give Shalach Manos. We said he might even be able to receive Shalach Manos. We said he's going to hear the Megillah either in his house, or by night, or by day, he'll actually go out to shul to hear Megillah. Matanas Lav Yoinim he can certainly give. So there's no conflict between Avelus and Purim. By Aninus, there is a conflict. And that is Basav Yayin. So over there, that's why the Chavetz Chaim says here, after Das Mechaber Le'el to Avelus Noig b'Purim, that's because there's no conflict between Avelus and Purim. Mikam Mokam Aninus, where there is a conflict, Sfir Le'ed Eina Noig, Ukamoisha Kasav Atam. Like he explains, because we cannot allow the Asay D'Yachid of Avelus to come into conflict with Purim. V'ayin Magen Avram Shehe'ela. Then the Chavetz Chaim says, take a look at the Magen Avram who suggests, the Dafka B'yoim Shechal Mitzvah Simchas Purim D'Yemei Mishta V'Simcha Ksiv. Well, this that we're going to allow the Oinin to have Bas V'yayin, it's only by day, not by night. By day, there's a Chiyuv of Sudas Purim, right? Yemei Mishta V'Simcha. Avaloi B'layla. Afila B'layla Rishayna, not the night of Yudalid. V'choshked B'layla Shnia, certainly he can't extend his Purim Suda to Tesvav and be eating Bas V'yayin on the night of Tesvav if he's an Oinin. Umashe Kosav Achakach. Okay, now let's pause here for a second in the Mishnah Berurah, and now let's go further in the Ramah. So again, we have over here the Mechaber. The Mechaber says, Aninus, there's a restriction of Bas V'yayin. That restriction comes into conflict with Sudas Purim, when you have to have Bas V'yayin. Says the Mechaber, guess what? The Oinin, he can have Bas V'yayin in order to have a beautiful Simcha Dika Sudas Purim. Comes along the Ramah. The Ramah says, whoa, you're relaxing the restrictions of Aninus and you're allowing him to have Bas V'yayin, then certainly you're also going to relax the restrictions on Mikra Megillah, on Tefillah, on Kriya Shema, right? If you're going to let him have a purpose to the Bas V'yayin, you have to let him do these things as well. Now says the Ramah, V'nira li the dafka balayla. And the way the Mishnah Berurah explains this Ramah, this that I'm telling you, that we're going to relax the restrictions of Aninus, and we're going to say that the Oinin should hear Megillah, even though Oinin is Pater Kol HaMitzvos, and he should daven, even though Oinin Pater Kol HaMitzvos, and he should say Kriya Shema, even though Oinin Pater Kol HaMitzvos, nearly the Dafka Balayla. That's only Purim by night. Afal Pisha Meisoi Mutal Lefanav. Even though he's an Oinin, the mace is there, the mace hasn't that Kfura yet. Purim night, we relax the restrictions, we let the Oinin hear the Megillah, or even lay in the Megillah, we let him say Kriya Shema, we let him daven by night. Aval, why? It's like the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, because by night you don't do Kfura. Now let's get this, let's remember. The halachos of Aninus apply typically the same way they apply by day, they apply by night. Somebody loses a relative on a Monday night somewhere in the middle of the year, he's an Oinin. He's not allowed to daven Ma'ariv, he's not allowed to say Kriya Shema, even though we don't do Kfura by night. Just like by day. But over here on Purim night, what the Ramah is saying is like this. If the Mechaber is telling me that Purim by day, we relax the restrictions of Aninus, and we allow the Oinin to have Bas V'yayin for a Purim Suda, then Purim by night, when anyway you wouldn't do Kfura because it's night, we're going to relax the restrictions of Aninus and let the Oinin daven Ma'ariv, say Kriya Shema, and hear Megillah. But only by night. Aval b'yoyim sheroitza lekavroi, but Purim by day, when now you could do Kvura, and you're supposed to do Kvura, Kvuras Meisai Kaidim. Now, don't go hear Megillah, don't go daven, don't go say Kriya Shema, first take care of Kvuras HaMeis. We learned that halacha earlier in Tafresh Pei Zayin, that Kvuras HaMeis comes before Megillah. V'lachein, and therefore, Kairei u'mispalal achakach. He should do Kvuras HaMeis first, and then lein Megillah, and then daven. Deloy odif b'Yom Tov v'Shabbos. There's no difference than an einin on Yom Tov or on Shabbos. K'may shenispar la'el Siman Ayin Aleph Kei Nirali. Now, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is Katan Chav Daled, and we're going to go a little bit overtime today, by the way, because I can't afford to leave too much for tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be Mirz Hashem, the final shir in God's Mishnah Berurah, and we're going to be making a Siyum celebration, so I must finish today's page. So we already read the first few lines of Eis Katan Chav Daled, and now let's go to the bottom line of the first column in the Mishnah Berurah. This that the Ramah that we just read says, the nirali dafka balayla, that the easing of the restrictions of aninus is only at night, like kai rak le'inyan megillah utfila ukriyishma. What he is referring to over there is davening ma'ariv, mikra megillah of night, and kriyishma of night. In other words, again, let's remember, the Mechaber said the einin is allowed to have basav yayin on Purim. The Magen Avram said only by day, because that's when you're mekayim the mitzvah sudas Purim. Yemei mishta v'simcha. So when do we ease the restrictions of aninus on the oval and let him have basav yayin? Only by day, not by night. Then the Ramah came and the Ramah said v'nirali dafka balayla. That sounds like the Ramah and the Magen Avram are contradicting. It sounds like the Magen Avram is saying not like the Ramah. Says the Chofetz Chaim, no. When the Ramah says nirali dafka balayla, he's referring to saying Kriya Shema by night, davening ma'ariv by night, and hearing Mikra Megillah by night. So the Magen Avram and the Ramah are addressing two different things. The Mechaber addressed one thing. He said we relaxed the restriction that an einin is not allowed to have basav yayin, and we relax it because of Sudas Purim. The Magen Avram said that's only Negeya by day. That's not Negeya by night, because there's no inyan of Sudas Purim by night. That's not called Sudas Purim. Yemei mishta v'simcha. The Ramah says we relax the restrictions of an einin on Purim, but once we relax the restrictions of an einin on Purim and we let him have basav yayin by day, we're also going to relax the restrictions of an einin on Purim by night, and we're going to allow him to say Kriya Shema, daven ma'ariv, and hear Megillah by night, because night anyway you don't do Kvura. Normally during the year an einin is an einin at night also, but on Purim, once we're relaxing the restrictions by day to let him have basav yayin, reasons the Ramah will also relax the restrictions by night, let him say Kriya Shema, daven ma'ariv, and hear Megillah. Okay. Eis Katan Chav Hei. The Kolshke Chakai B'Mikra. Ritzayin Olaymer. What the Ramah wants to say is, Tikishem Shebishvil Mitzvah Simchas Hayoim. Dachina Nasa Seida Velus. V'yitarnu B'Basav Yayin. The same way you're being matter the Einin to have Basav Yayin by day, to be Mekayim Sudas Purim. Bevadai Ein Roy Lepotre Balayla. Mimikra Megillah Ushar Mitzvahs. You can't tell me that tomorrow by day you're going to tell him that even though he's an einin, he could have basav yayin by a Purim Suda, but tonight he can't daven ma'ariv, say Kriya Shema and hear Mikra Megillah. Can't say derech lekavrayos, because anyway he's not going to do Kvura now. V'doima la'einin b'leil Yom Tov Sheni. This is like somebody who's an einin on Yom Tov Sheni shel Goliath by night. The harbe paiskim chivu b'mitzvos mitam zeh. You could take issue with that comparison. Echad, for one reason, there are those that hold that an einin taka is chayiv in mitzvahs, is not chayiv b'mitzvahs the night of Yom Tov Sheni. V'oy d'shamak upon Yom Tovu, or the kach in chala aninus mak b'shei derech l'kavra b'layla b'shei b'purim dekar simcha b'yomu b'layla derech l'shalayla shachol the b'vadei chal aninus av shei derech l'kavra yaz. So he says The comparison to Yom Tov Sheni, right? We want to make a comparison over here to Yom Tov Sheni Shalgolius. Somebody's on Einin on Yom Tov Sheni Shalgolius. Most poskim hold that he's chayiv in mitzvahs because you're not going to do kfur anyway. It's night. But the Mishnah Berurah says you could be mefakfik on that comparison. First of all, some poskim would disagree, and they say that you taka are not chayiv in mitzvahs Yom Tov Sheni Shalgolius by night. And also, what are you comparing to Yom Tov? Yom Tov is Yom Tov. Purim is not mamash Yom Tov. Okay. Ois kat l'chavav. Kfuras meisai kaidem k'maishin ispar v'tzayin loymar. We said earlier in Tavkuf Peizayin that Kfuras meis comes first. Disham luchach, because over there in Tafreish Peizayin we learned the lav dafka meis mitzvah kaidem l'kriyas Megillah. It's not only a real mace mitzvah. That's a mace that mamish doesn't have people to make kvura. A mace that's mutal bebezayin. It's not only a mace that's mutal bebezayin, where kvura of the mace comes before kriyas Megillah. Do adin kol mace shein like karvin kidei tzarchai. Any mace that's not going to have a minion, any mace that's not going to have enough people to treat him with the proper respect, hapagea boy kavret chila v'achkach karei. His burial comes before Mikra Megillah. So, over here too, somebody's an Einin, he has a mace to deal with, he has to deal with the mace before Mikra Megillah. So again, the Ramah is saying, V'nira li dafka b'layla, this that will relax the restrictions on the Einin, even though an Einin is supposed to be patur b'chol mitzvahs, we're going to let him lein Megillah and David Mariv and say Kriya Shema. That's by night, because you don't do Kfura. But not by day, because by day it's no different than any other mace. Whenever there's a mace on Purim, you got to do the Kfura first. Over there already, the Magen Avram said many poskim would disagree. That really Mikra Megillah should come before Kfuras HaMeis. The minig is to do the Kfuras HaMeis after davening, after Megillah. But the Magen Avram says the Einin can't be chai v'kriyas Megillah. Halo you potter b'kol mitzvahs. Ve'ech yosef b'mashe shama b'tzimar akareish oz lo chayiv klal. Adarabba, if the Einin hears Megillah, he can't even be yotzeh because he's not chayiv. V'alkein masika Magen Avram. So the Magen Avram concludes, Dafal pishe shama hakriya b'tzibur. Even if the Einin heard Megillah b'tzibur, yekre'en shenis achar shenik b'rabeis. He has to read it over again or hear it over again after the kfura when he's chayiv. He's like any other einin, the kaidem akfura who potter, that before the kfura he's potter b'chol mitzvahs. Ula'akar akfura ayla el b'siman ayin aleph b'mishna berurah sif katan dalet sham uvur kol hapratim, whether we should put on tefillin or not, whether we should say kriya shema or not. Ulini tefillin das kabach redu dolayiniach, that an oval doesn't put on tefillin at all on the day of the kfura. Ukitela el b'siman tav b'siman lamed ches Sif Aleph. I want to read through the next Mishnah Berurah before I say anything else. The Ramah concluded that by day the Kfura should be done first, and then should come davening, and then should become Megillah. Before the Kfura he's potter, because he's potter b'kol mitzvahs. The Lazem Messiah. The loyadif b'Shabbos v'yomtiv. V'hayna b'yomtiv sheni k'shekayvrei. V'chem b'Shabbos k'shamach shechalat chum. L'tzarchei kfura. Anytime an einin is busy with tzarchei hameis on Shabbos or on Yomtiv, how are you being oisik at tzarchei hameis on Shabbos? If you're busy walking all the way to the edge of the tchum, so that right away after Shabbos you'll be able to go over the tchum and take care of the tzarchei hameis, you're potter from all the mitzvahs. V'chein who potter az b'kol mitzvahs v'chol shkein kam. Okay. What's troubling me over here? What's troubling me over here is like this. I don't understand anymore what seems to be the basic halacha of Sif Zayin. The basic halacha of Sif Zayin is the halacha that the Mechaber began with. The Mechaber said, an einin who is typically osir in basav yayin is mutter b'basav yayin on Purim. Why is he mutter b'basav yayin on Purim? Because on Purim he has a chiyuv of Sudas Purim. What do you mean he has a chiyuv? He's part of the Kol HaMitzvahs? No. he's chayiv in Simchas Purim, because Simchas Purim is an asay de rabim, v'loy osi asay de yochid of avelus, v'dachi asay de rabim of Simchas Purim. So the Mechaber came over here to establish that even though an einin is normally part to be called a mitzvah, he's chayiv in Simchas Purim while he's an einin, and he's allowed to have basav yain. In response to that, seemingly, came along the Ramah, and the Ramah said, hold it. If we're relaxing the restrictions of aninus on Purim, and we're allowing the einin to have basav yain, then we also have to relax the restrictions of einin and allow him to say Kriya Shema, to daven, to hear Megillah, and like the Chavetz Chaim explained in Ois Katan Chav Hey, he said, the Geshem Shebeshvil Mitzvah Simchas Hayoim, the Chinan Es Asay Da Avelus V'Hi Tarnu B'Basav Yayin, if because of the Chiyuv of Simchas Hayoim, you're allowing him to have Basav Yayin, Bevadai Ein Roy Lepatrei Balayla Mimikra Megillah Ushar Mitzvahs, how could you tell me that Purim night he's going to be potter from davening Ma'ariv, from saying Kriya Shema, from Mikra Megillah, if tomorrow you're going to allow him to have Basav Yayin? So the Ramah said, if the Mechaber says that by day he's allowed to have Basav Yayin by Sudas Purim, then by night he's allowed to daven Ma'ariv, he's allowed to say Kriya Shema, he's allowed to hear Mikra Megillah. Okay, beautiful. How about by day? Logically, I would say the same thing by day. Not only that, I would say halachos kama v'kama. If you're telling me that he could daven Ma'ariv, he could say Kriya Shema Shalayla, and he could hear Mikra Megillah by night, right? So, by day also. Now, by day, okay, it's not a kal v'chomer. It's not halachos kama v'kama. By night, he can't do kvura. But by day, he could do kvura. So, by day, the Ramah says, v'nirali dafka b'layla. This that I'm telling you, that he could daven Ma'ariv, say Kriya Shema, and hear Megillah, that's only by night. Because by night, you don't do kvura. But by day, he can't daven. He can't hear Megillah. He can't say Kriya Shema before he does the kvura. Why? Because by night, you can't do kvura. But by day, you could do kvura. So, now that we take the Mechaber and the Ramah, what is the final scenario that we seem to have? We have a scenario like this. It's Purim by day. Meisai mutar lefanav. This guy is an oinen. He has a mace that's waiting for kvura. So he's an oinen. What is his halacha now? Could he go daven? No. The Ramah says he can't go daven. He's got to do kvura first. Can he say Kriya Shema? No. Can't say Kriya Shema. He's got to do kvura first. Could he hear Megillah? No. Can't hear Megillah. He's got to do kvura first. He's got to go do kvura first. Not only that, the Magen Avram says if he does hear Megillah, he's not Yotzeh because he wasn't chayiv. So he's got to either lane Megillah or hear Megillah after the kvura. Okay. Could he have a Sudas Purim with Basar Yayin? Yeah. So the Mechaber says Yesh Sha'ayim Mutar B'Basar Yayin. He's allowed to have Basar Yayin. Why? Because he's chayiv in Simchas Purim. Why is he chayiv in Simchas Purim? The loyasi asay the yochid avelus v'daki loyas asay the rabim of Simchas Purim. So he's not going to have the Sudas Purim with Basar Yayin after the kvura. That he's not an oinen anymore. That's not. Then the halacha of the Mechaber is not negeya anymore. The whole halacha of the Mechaber is only negeya while he's an oinen before the kvura happened. So what comes out is something which to me seems very, very odd. It comes out that this fellow is an oinen, Purim by day. He's allowed to sit down. Not only is allowed, he's mechuyev to sit down and have a Sudas Purim with Basar Yayin, despite the fact that he's an oinen. But he can't say Kriya Shema, he can't daven, and he can't hear Megillah. All of that's going to have to wait till after the kvura. But the Sudas Purim with Basar Yayin, he can do while he's an oinen before the kvura. That's what seems to come out. And it just seems very strange to me. I have to speak to a Rav and ask a Shaila Halach L'Maisa, but that seems to be what comes out, and that is what's puzzling me here in Siv Zayin. Sorry we went a little bit overtime today, but again, I can't push it off for tomorrow. Tomorrow's a big day. Tomorrow, B'yetz Hashem, we get bezras Hashem Yisborach to finish Gans Mishnah Berurah. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discuss of limud HaTorah should be begging against Klal Yisrael. The Rosh should say Yeshua Sefor's Parnasa Chiduchim to all those in need, and we should be zeicher to see the BS God Tzedek. Very Amen. Be well.